Hello, my name's Jonathan Culver. I'm a sales engineer with Teradici, and today I'm going to talk about the Management Console Enterprise Edition. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the login process. The Management Console uses a web interface to manage the Xero clients in your environment. And the default login is admin and password of password lowercase. Okay, now we're in. This is the dashboard view, which gives you an executive overview of your Xero client deployment. You can see deployment status of Xero clients, offline, online, grouped and ungrouped, showing you the health of the management console itself. If I now move to the next tab, which is endpoints, this shows me all of the Xero clients that I have in my environment, and it also allows me to discover new Xero clients that I'm bringing in. So the group tab is showing me some groups which I've created already and some Xero clients which I've placed into those groups. If I move to the ungrouped tab, you can see I have discovered some ungrouped Xero clients which are sitting in there ready for me to move into a group, and the group will have a profile assigned to it to give you settings to deploy to the Xero clients. So what I'm going to do now is do a manual endpoint discovery to show some new Xero clients connecting to the network. I'm just going to lean over and turn on some of my Xero clients in the lab. Wait for those to boot. So if I now click on the endpoint discovery button, this allows me to enter an IP address range. And this will search this particular IP address range to discover any new Xero clients on the network. So let's see what happens. You'll see the button changes to a new status, endpoints discovered. So let's hit the done button. And we still haven't seen anything come into the console yet, so we need to hit the refresh button on the right hand side. And we can see two new Xero clients have appeared, and it's showing their name currently with their MAC address, it's showing their IP address and their software version, which is the firmware we've installed on the Xero clients. It's also showing us the endpoint description. So these are Teradici 2nd generation dual display Xero clients. So what I can now do is take one of these Xero clients and look at some more information about it. So if I hit the details button, this is now interrogating that Xero client and showing us the settings that have been applied to this client, such as discovery and security and session information. This is very factory default, this is. Let's go back to the top. If we click the structure button, I can now move that Xero client into a group that I've already created. So let's choose to move it to the Milton Keynes office. And now you can see it's moved, and we can look in the Groups tab, and the Milton Keynes office now has this new Xero client, and you've also noticed the fully qualified domain name has now appeared after the discovery. The reason I wanted it to be in this group is because this group has a particular profile assigned to it, which allows me to control the Xero client's behavior. So now I can assign a profile such as network test profile, and it's warning me that I am assigning some settings to the Xero clients in this particular group. So this is just a confirmation button. You can see some existing Xero clients in different groups that I have here. Let's go back to the Ungroup tab. We have another new one here, which I'm going to look at in a bit more detail. What I'd like to show you is the local admin web interface of that Xero client. There's no password on this device. And what you see now in firmware 5, that is a requirement for your Zero clients to be managed by the new console, is there are some new tabs. So first of all, let's check the version. You can see the firmware version is 5.0.0, and in the configuration menu we have a new sub-menu called Management, and we can now see how this Zero client is managed and who it's managed by. So we can see, for example, that the management console has an IP address of 172.16.0.112, and we can see the status that it's being managed by that particular management console. You can also clear the management status. So this button at the bottom here allows you to move this Zero client to another management console, say for example in another office, to clear that console's management status so it can be managed by a new console. I'm going to close this tab down now. So that's the endpoints window. You can also filter on endpoints. So if you have a very large list of endpoints in this window, you can filter by various criteria, such as endpoint family. It's Teradici, endpoint type. So it's Zero client. We can also choose endpoint unique ID, software version. So what version of the software is running. So firmware 5, for example, and IP address and other filters as well. Let's move on to the Profile tab. So this is one of the main features of the management console. A profile is a collection of settings that you apply to a group, and the group contains Zero clients which then take those settings. So there's a security profile here, we've got a network test profile, and we've got a profile to allow you to revert back to previous versions of the management console with previous firmware. So what I'm going to do is create a new profile, and let's call this production deployment, and we can give it a description. And now it's asking me what type of profile we'd like to add. So we have a choice of dual or quad profile. I'm going to go for dual. And now you see a list of all the features you're able to assign into this profile. On the left-hand side, you can see some sub-menus. These are the sections in which you can work to change these settings. The first thing I want to do, though, is to change the firmware. So the firmware you see in this sub-menu are firmware that have already been implemented into this management console. So I'm going to choose 5.0 release candidate 3. I can also choose some network settings in here. So for example, let's set this in the profile. I'm going to go for version IP4, and that's enabled. I'm going to choose DHCP for the IP addressing scheme, and I'm going to leave IP version 6. And as you can see, there are settings for discovery of Zero clients. So we can use SLP or we can use DNS service records. We've also got security features as well, which allow you to lock down the menus on the Zero client so users or rogue administrators cannot change anything. We can also put certificates on the Zero client. We can also choose the session type as well. So I'm going to choose a VMware view. So I'm typing in the name of the VMware view server, and now I need to choose this on the menu. So view connection server. That's the URL of the view connection server. And these are all the session type advanced options. So for example, I could choose things like auto connect, which is like a kiosk mode. I can choose certificate check mode. So the Zero client checks the VCS for a certificate to trust it. And I've got various other settings I can choose. I can also choose in some instances, the image quality of the Zero client, so when it's talking to a backend, it can dictate frame rates, image quality preferences, and build to lossless features. What else have we got here? We can choose bandwidth of network, so that affects performance as well. So you can choose device bandwidth limit, you can choose the floor, which is the minimum, and target is for congestion. We can also enable or disable audio features as well on the Zero client and choose how the audio channel is used. So for example, a USB device can be sent down the audio channel if it's an audio headset, for example, using a USB connector. We can choose logging levels for troubleshooting, and we can also choose power down and timeout for Zero clients as well for screensaver purposes. And we can also choose USB options as well, so we can, for example, disable unauthorized USB devices apart from keyboard and mouse by entering the PID and VID of the devices, or disabling non-HID devices. You can choose language preferences. So we have a range of languages to use on the menu. Okay, and we can also choose keyboard layouts as well. So we have a few keyboard layouts that you can choose, as you can see. Okay, so once we finish with that, we can now save that profile. And there's an error somewhere. Let's try that again. That's better. So it didn't look like my URL, for example. Let's save that now. And we see another error somewhere. That's better. So I needed to put HTTPS on the front of that URL. So now I have a new profile. Let's go back to endpoints and groups, and I can create a new group, for example. There's the new group, and what I can now do is change the profile of that group. So by default there's no profile, and you can see now in that list is the production deployment profile. And again, it's warning me that the settings will be applied to the Zero clients. As you can see, there are no Zero clients in the Southampton office. So what I can do is go back to my ones I found recently. Let's take this one, for example, and move it to the Southampton office group. Let's just check it's been moved. There we go. You can also see in the profile menu that it shows you the profile that's been deployed against that group. Okay, the next tab is scheduling. So we can now schedule different types of jobs. I've already got one in here that resets all Milton Keynes Office Zero clients at a particular time and day. So let's create a new schedule. And we have a choice of three options. We can apply a profile on a schedule, we can power down on a schedule, and we can power reset on a schedule, which is just like recycling the Zero client for turn on. So let's do apply a profile. Let's give this a name. Let's enable this and choose the group, Southampton office. And we can choose a start time. So let's go for the 25th. and it's going to do this at 11:42 a.m., which is a bit of a strange time to do this. Let's choose this as PM, and we can either run it once or we can run on a recurring schedule. So we can do this on a weekly basis, for example, and we could do this 25th is Wednesday. Let's go for recurring on a Wednesday, and we save that. Okay, so you can have different types of jobs in a schedule, and they'll run all the time for you. And if we go back to the dashboard, you can see in the bottom right pane the upcoming scheduled jobs that are going to happen. Okay, on the auto configuration tab, this is an alternative to using endpoint discovery. So what we can do here is set the management console to automatically discover zero clients and place them in a particular group of our choosing based on an IP subnet range. So for example, if I choose a new rule here, let's choose the group where they're going to join. So they're going to go into the Munich office. And now I need to put an IP address range in there. So I'm expecting possibly 50 zero clients to be deployed in the Munich office. There's the subnet range I've chosen. Okay. And let's go back to auto configuration. So we now have a new rule, and I also need to turn the auto configuration option on. So for example, in the range that I've been working in this overview, you can see the 172.16.0 network will automatically place any zero client in the Milton Keynes office. If I'd had the auto configuration turned on, those zero clients we've already discovered would have automatically been placed into the Milton Keynes office. And the last tab, settings. So here this allows you to manage the management console, doing various jobs like setting up users. Now you can see here I've got 4 different users that are allowed to simultaneously manage the management console. Currently these have the same admin rights. So you can see the roles, they're all administrators. Let's create a new user then. There's the role and the username. Let's call this user Bob. Bob Roberts, and give that person a password. And we can choose what time zone they work in as well. So let's say that he's going to work in Poland, and let's enable this account. Okay, so there's Bob Roberts. So he can now manage and log in. And I'll show you about how a user will log in a minute. If I go to naming, this allows me to choose the display name of the zero client when they're discovered. You saw that the discovery allows you to choose the UNC name, or you can use the user endpoint current unique ID, which is based on the MAC address. We can also add a prefix in if you like. We can add group naming. We can also put postfixes on there as well, and you can rename endpoints when moving from groups, etc. In the software tab, this allows us to import new firmware versions when they're released and allow those to be deployed through a profile into a group. So as you can see, I've got 4.8, which allows me to move zero clients back to an earlier version and to be managed by earlier versions of management consoles. I have a release candidate of version 5, and I'm going to add the full production version of 5. So I need to select the file from my local machine. And if I go to my software and utils folder, which has all my firmware involved, I'm going to then choose the particular folder. And notice here we have 2 firmware files. One is for use with the management console, which ends in PCoIP, and the other one is one you can deploy directly onto a zero client, which ends in .all. So I'm going to choose the management console version, and now I'm going to upload it. Okay, so now we can see it's it's being used. And what's happened there is, because 2.0 clients have already got 5.0.0 production, it's recognized that, and the endpoints we discovered earlier on have the full version of firmware 5. We can also choose the security level. So by default, the security level is set to basic. We also have a mid-range security and a high security, and this allows us to use various security features to lock down which management console can control which zero client. And this uses certificates. So by default, there's a self-signed certificate which is installed on the management console, but you can use your own, and then you can update and change the security status of your zero client and your management console. This stops anyone from introducing a rogue management console or rogue zero clients into your network, and for rogue devices to be managed by rogue management consoles. The database tab allows me to save all of this good work that I've been doing in this management console, save it to a backup file, and download that onto my PC or somewhere safe on the network. So if the management console does have a problem, or if I need to go back to a previous iteration of the management console, I can restore that file. So here I've got one here. And if I was to use this and hit the restore button, all of the discovery we've done, all of the profiles we've created will be lost. So I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to do a backup now. And that should appear in the list. This is actually being backed up directly into the management console itself. So what I now need to do is to download that out of the management console so I can store it safely somewhere. Okay, so there's the file. I'm going to save it onto my local hard disk. It's been saved automatically into my download folder on my PC. Let's go back to the settings tab. And now we have those two backups. I'm not going to show you restore until I've shown you this last tab here. So this is just showing you the version and the build number of the zero client management console. So we've got 2.0.0, which is the enterprise edition, at 4030, which is the build version. We can also choose to introduce a higher level of logging for the management console. So at the moment it's info. If you need to troubleshoot, we can go to trace level logging to gather those for troubleshooting. I'm just going to go back to the dashboard now. Okay, and I'm just going to go to endpoints. And what I'm going to do now is something which is a slightly destructive. I'm going to go back to the database tab just to show you how this works. And this was an original backup I did about a month ago, and I'm going to restore that, which will go over the top of all the work I've done now. And it will have cleared all of the work we've done in this management console today. Okay, so let's go back to the endpoints tab. Those are the ones there originally. If we go to the group tab, you can see that the Milton Keynes office only has one zero client inside it. You can see the Southampton office group has disappeared. So we've now refreshed back to what we had originally when we started. If I now go to settings again, database, new backup, and if I do a restore now, we should be back to where we were before the previous restore. Let's check. There we go. There's the Southampton office. There's the new zero client, and there's the new zero client in the Milton Keynes office. So it's all working fine. If you have any questions, please let us know. Here's the email address and the Twitter account. Thank you very much for listening.